Hey, everybody, welcome to Act 3 on CHLY 101.7 FM. It is Monday, and in the Zoom booth with me, we're going to talk all things Guatemala. Well, not really all things Guatemala, but my good friend Gerry Beltgens is here with us today, and we're going to talk about the Access to Education Collaborative. Hey, Gerry, how are you?
Doing really good. This sunny day, it's cold and crisp, but it's a wonderful day.
I know, aren't we blessed? Hey, I mean, you would think that when we're talking about, Guatemala, we think warm temperatures and we think, and being that we have, a little bit of a chill thing going on right at the moment, it makes me want to reach right down to Guatemala. Gerry, you've been working with the people down there for a good long time. How about you tell us a little bit about what you do and what Access to Education Collaborative is?
Okay, Access to Education Collaborative is evolved out of some of the other work that I did with Rotary over the last several years. And I've always been interested in international projects. And that was one of the things that really got me hooked on Rotary. So after I retired, and I think it was the second or third time, after I
I was
retired.
going to say, wait a second. I think haven't you retired like 3 times? No, maybe
Yeah,
4.
at least, yeah.
That's okay though.
I ended up working for an organization that was set up through Rotary that I'd been a champion for, which was called Disaster Aid, and it was the Disaster Aid Canada, and I was the executive director for that for 2 years. During that time, I made a lot of connections down in Central America. And it's kind of nice to work in Central America because you're in the same time zone, and totally different language, of course, but in the same time zone. So I started off with disaster aid, where we were doing disaster relief. So after floods, we would provide tents and things like that. But one of the things that kept on coming up was the need for longer term solutions. And so part of my background is in education, a big part of it actually, and post-secondary education and trades and training. So I started looking at that. We also got involved in water reconstruction projects because the floods had wiped out a lot of them. A lot of the small town water systems. So we did a couple of those. And during that time, I got to really know some great people down there because anytime I wanted to find out what was going on in the community, what I did was I would contact a Rotary Club in that community or in the general area, and they always knew what was going on. So that was a great introduction to them. Working with those people over time, the thing that really stood out was the need for access to education, which is why I called it that, and also the need for people to be working together, because quite often we would see all sorts of different nonprofit organizations as well as Rotary Clubs working in communities, but not necessarily working together. So and doing overlap. So there's lots of, the idea of doing good in a community is fantastic, but quite often people go in blind and don't really know what the needs are within the community before they start doing stuff. So what I found,
sometimes the help actually isn't really a help. It turns into more of a hinder. So yeah.
And look up disaster aid fails and on the internet, and you'll definitely see some sad stories. Anyway, what I came to believe, based on the conversations I had with Rotarians and people in the communities, was that if they could increase the level of education in Guatemala or Honduras, their kids would have a better chance in the future, because most of the poor people and the indigenous people are locked out of the jobs, locked out of politics, locked out of things, because they just, I mean, the level of education that's available in these countries is generally pretty low, and in the rural areas, it's not very good. So
working more in rural areas, like tell us a little bit about, like, I mean, this is just a little bit of a kind of a peek into what you're really doing, and by no means is it that in depth, but to scratch the surface, you're actually going into these communities and you're providing educational opportunities for the community or as a disaster relief support. I know that that's how you started. I know that you're not necessarily doing that now, but like, there's obviously a complement happening here.
Yeah, that's a really, really important question. So I'm now working with my own nonprofit, the Access to Education Collaborative, and backed by Rotary in a lot of ways. And the we actually go into the small communities. I'm talking 4 hours into the mountains,
Yeah.
by 4x4, and helping set up. Believe it or not, we're setting up computer labs and helping the teachers teach
Oh,
basic computer skills, but also we also include a digital library that holds virtually all of the information that's available for the schools. And I'm going to talk mostly about Guatemala because the material that's available there is all of the entire curriculum from preschool up to, well, past grade 12. And then along with that, there's medical help, how to do wiring, how to fix your car. All of this is on this digital library, which is called Rachel, for Remote Access Computer, and a couple other things, but it's in Spanish. So yeah, we actually go and set that up. Now the people do have to have electricity, but we're trying to work with some people that and set up solar systems as well. But most of the small communities do have electricity.
so how does this work then? I mean, when we're talking about these small communities, how many village, I'm sorry to call it a villager, but I'm calling it a villager because to me,
Yeah.
this is now quite a small community, right? So it is more of a village than a city or a town or a municipality. So about how many people are living in these villages that you're going into the mountains to visit?
Oh, anywhere from 200 or 300 to a
Oh,
couple of thousand.
yeah, so they're actually a good sized
Some of
community
them
that
are,
you're
yeah, and
going into.
some of them have proper schools, concrete block and
Yeah.
that. It kind of stopped at the concrete block part.
Yeah, no, I understand. And loving Mexico the way that I do, I know it's not Guatemala, but it's the rebar kind of half roofs that are continuing to go up. Can you maybe paint us a little bit of a picture of what Guatemala looks like through your eyes?
Oh my God. I absolutely love Guatemala. I was, when I first said that I was going to go to Guatemala, people were going, "Oh my God, you're going to be kidnapped, you're going to be robbed." It's
People
all
say that
drug
about all
cartels.
kinds of rural places, and yet the best adventures are there. And very few people actually do get pickpocketed and robbed and all of that stuff. But
That's
you
been,
still have to be aware. But having said that,
yeah, I found it to be one of the friendliest places I've ever been to. Kind people. I'm sure that, you don't walk downtown Guatemala City at 1 o'clock in the morning,
you don't walk
yeah,
downtown Nanaimo City either,
exactly.
or
So
downtown Ladysmith. Like, why would you do
that's right.
that?
It's common sense. You just use
Yeah,
common sense.
yeah,
The areas that I work in mostly are in the city outside the periphery of Antigua, which is a beautiful city built in the 1500s. And also Lago de Atitlan. So you may notice that the places that I work tend to be really beautiful.
yeah, yeah.
Even though the people may be poor, it's just so wonderful to travel there. So I generally stay in a rented room, and I stay out of the hotels,
Yeah.
and I cover my own costs, and just work with the locals. It's great.
And so, how long do you traditionally go down for at any given time?
Well, I'm going in February for 3 weeks, but normally I go for anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. This is
Yeah.
a little shorter this time because we're renovating a house, and my wife's birthday's coming up, and I I need to be
A few
around for
things
some.
that you have to do before you're able to go save the
Yeah,
world down in Guatemala.
yeah, I'll be back down in Guatemala again this fall. I'm also president of Rotary this year, so that's kind of digging into
Oh,
it.
Jerry, congratulations. I didn't realize that you'd moved up the line. Awesome.
That's my second time. It's my second time
Good
to
for you.
Lady Smith Rotary Club. But it's all this stuff feeds me. Like I said, I've retired a couple of times, and
Yeah.
doing this, going to Guatemala is, I mean, it can be really heartrending at times.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know, I always come back feeling so much more, I don't know, joy, happiness, love.
Yeah,
Yeah,
fulfillment for sure, I would
yeah,
suspect.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So listen, I'm curious because, when we talked a little bit at the top of the hour, we were talking about sort of the indigenous lens that happens.
Mhm.
Is the indigenous lens in Guatemala similar to that we see up here in Canada, or for our indigenous population, is there this a similar kind of uh truth and reconciliation opportunity, or is it just an entirely different thing when it comes to the nationals that live in Guatemala?
Mhm. So the people that live in Guatemala are mostly Mayans, though there are other groups as well.
Mhm.
They have been extremely badly treated, and especially with some of the later governments, like the one that supposedly is being changed today. Um,
Mm.
so there's no truth and reconciliation going on down there, and about 45% of the population of Guatemala is Mayan, is indigenous, but they have not. Um, they're not getting their land back. They're not getting like here in Canada. I really sense a shift. There's a recognition of
Yeah,
Indigenous rights in Canada, and
indeed.
we're,
Hmm.
we're moving towards that more and more, and
Hmm.
rightly so. In Guatemala, it's not like that.
No.
So, um, yeah, I mean, there's a really terrible history. There was over 200,000 Indigenous people killed during the 30 Years' War that started in the late 60s and ended in the late 90s. I mean, it was so against that background, there is still a lot of trauma, and
Yes,
and the older people really don't like to talk about it. They don't really want to try it, and there's and huge generalizations, right?
of course, of course.
But the older people have seen what happens when they try and strike, when they try and get their land back. And so they just, the ones that I met in a lot of cases, they just don't want to talk about it. The young people, of course, are saying, hey, this can't go on. So
Yes.
so that's why right now the political situation is pretty dicey.
Yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, at the time that this is being recorded, the politics are very volatile in Guatemala. As you pointed out, that there is elections going on right at the moment, and a new presidente, I guess, who is going
El
to take
presidente,
El
sí.
Presidente, who is going
Yeah,
to take
yeah.
over.
Bernardo Aravello.
Bernardo Alavayu. What a lovely
Yeah.
name. I hope he brings prosperousness to Guatemala. So but so you started this as way back when you were, in the doing Disaster Aid Canada, which was a huge success and did so much wonderful work. Does Disaster Aid still exist now, or have they
Absolutely.
folded?
No,
Oh,
no.
they do still
No,
exist.
so Disaster Aid Canada is a part of a group of disaster aid organizations under the Rotary umbrella.
Right.
And there's, I think, 12 different regions that are like Disaster Aid Australia, Disaster Aid Indonesia, Disaster Aid Europe, Disaster Aid Great Britain, that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
They're doing tremendous work. They did a huge amount of work during, well, right after the uh, uh, Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, through
I would
disaster.
imagine they're still there in the war in Ukraine. Disaster Aid is still
Oh yeah,
on the boots on ground,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
trying to get resources to people.
yeah. And so of course it's not weapons because it's rotary. So what's going over is like generators and
Of
hospital
course.
beds and
Yeah.
equipment for the hospitals and that. So really, it's to look after the people. Um, it yeah, it's to look after the people that are in harm's way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they sent 14 containers in the last 2 years.
Which is phenomenal to me. 14
Mhm.
containers is a ton.
It's just
So
amazing.
That is amazing. And so now you've stepped away from that platform, so to
Yeah.
speak. You come into this new platform of Access to Education Collaborative. I'm assuming that it's more than just education. You talked a little bit about the computer stuff and setting up these computer labs. How is disaster aid? Is there any connection to help support community where they're at, or like, are you bringing water or purification systems or anything like that into these areas of Guatemala under this new umbrella, or is that with the other umbrella?
That's a great question. We're still doing some water projects, but it's more through Rotary. So disaster aid really has its menu, and it's quite specific.
Right.
It's disaster relief. Ours is, what can we do that is going to make change in the long run? And so water systems are important. We also support malnutrition is rampant especially in the smaller communities in Guatemala. That's the really hard part, is to seeing these kids. Something like 50% of indigenous children are stunted, are well below the normal height. And you see it when you see what they eat. You know, a tortilla for breakfast with maybe a bit of salt and a cup of coffee to curb the hunger pains is not uncommon for children before they go to school, if they can go to school. And we all know how hard it is for kids that don't eat well. They struggle,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So
food security is a huge issue among young
it's
people.
a huge issue.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we try and do is we also provide nutritional supplements along with the computers and that. And so we raise money for that. So there is specific nutritional supplements that have been designed for the diet in Guatemala, and designed by local medical people. So it does help. We can see the difference in the kids that are getting it.
So please forgive my arrogance and my ignorance. And I'm using those two words very specifically. My lack of knowledge is an impediment to me being able to answer some of the questions I want to ask, because there is, when I think about food security in places like Guatemala and Honduras, where the weather is very different than it is here, whether, fruit grows like crazy and in abundance. The soil is very lush. I'm unsure as to why there is a food security issue under that circumstance. I mean, I get it in Canada, across the country, where we freeze out for half a year. Like, that makes sense, where there's, issues. And so, feast or famine, for lack of better words, in the summertime. I get that. But I don't understand from such a lush soil where the problems lay.
Yeah, well, this underlies the massive problem within Guatemala of poverty, food security and poverty. In Canada, First Nations have, I mean, their land has been cut back tremendously, but they still have land. In Guatemala, all of the land is either owned by the government or by outside corporations. And so they don't even, the people that I've met, and this isn't just the Mayans, but it's also the other people poorer people that live in the countryside, they don't have yards to grow anything. They may have a piece of property, but it's concrete, and a concrete block building right to the edges. So it's rare for people to have a piece of property that they can grow on. Almost all of the food that's grown by these people is either sent into the cities or it's exported. Guatemala has huge debt to the International Monetary Fund, and so on. And the only way they can pay off that debt is by sending away their resources. So people don't, even though avocados grow locally, they rarely have avocados because they're worth more than they can afford. Right.
So, and in some of these cultures, they're making pennies a day, right? And I would imagine the further people are away from the city, the even less money that's available, because just the rollover of trade would make it difficult.
So food costs the same down there because it's all sold, right? So if you go to the grocery store, there's no fresh vegetables or anything like that in any of the grocery stores. There's canned stuff. There's tons of chips and pop because that's
Super
what's
cheap stuff to
available.
produce.
Super cheap. And in a lot of the areas they've been told that Coca-Cola is pure and the water is bad.
Wow.
It's true, It's so when you go to somebody's home, they're very proud to serve you a Coca-Cola or an Orange Crush, or
right.
So that's an honor because water is bad. Okay. So this goes really back to the problem of children, malnourished children, is it's cheaper to buy a bag of chips than it is to buy a head of lettuce.
Yeah. It's cheaper here in Canada right now to buy it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And so food is expensive. Rent is expensive. And generally people don't own a home. And so what they rent is a concrete block shell with a tin roof and a fire in the corner, and maybe sleep on the floor. So that's the sort of stuff that they can afford now. There's from one extreme to the other. There's
of course,
a lot of people that live relatively well, but the minimum wage in Guatemala is approximately $500.
Yeah. So you're not going very far on $500 a month.
No. So very rarely do people own cars unless they have are running a business that requires a car, such as like there's quite a few Uber drivers and taxis and so on. So if you've got a vehicle, you're generally driving people around. So you make it fun. And I have seen the oldest, most beat up Toyota pickup trucks still running down there. They say that the Toyota pickup trucks go to Guatemala to die, but they don't.
No, they don't. They survive and they do very well.
Oh my God!
I learned how to drive on a Datsun B210, which was basically a Toyota.
Yeah.
And they can fall apart and ringy dingy jangy jangy, and honestly, they just keep on going and going. Volkswagens are the same for the very same reason.
Yeah. You don't see a lot of Volkswagens down there, but boy, Toyota pickup trucks are everywhere.
That's hilarious.
And, if it's only rolled off a cliff 2 or 3 times, it's still good.
But it's still good. It's fine. It doesn't matter.
And the other part is that, like for here we have minivans. That's the family mover. Down there, it's 125cc motorcycles with 5 people.
Yes, of course, right? You get images of people all balancing on these little, dirt bikes, basically.
Well, they're just they're little tiny motorcycles with. We wouldn't even let them on the highway here.
No.
But like a family has a motorcycle, that's a big deal. They can.
It is. They can get around.
So you got a kid sitting on the gas tank, the driver, a kid squished between mom and dad, and another one in a backpack on the back. Now, five to a motorcycle is not all the time, but 3 and 4 is super common.
Wow, amazing!
That's how people get around. Yeah. So it's a different life. Let me tell you, it's a different.
Well, and I think that's the funny thing is, there's a lot of people that talk about poverty. And I want to we're going to take a quick station identification and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more. But, there's so many perceptions that we have of poverty and what poverty looks like. And so I'm just really looking forward to breaking that part of our conversation open here in just a moment. Okay. Hey, if you have just tuned in, you've tuned into Act 3 on CHOY 101.7 FM. I'm Kathy Holmes. In my Zoom booth today, I have with me Gerry Beltgens. I'm sure I pronounced his name wrong that time.
You got it.
Beltgens. Oh no, I got it. Brilliant. And we're talking all things Guatemala, and we're talking about a wonderful organization that he's created along with the Rotary called Access to Education Collaborative. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Listen, you guys know every time I get an opportunity to have airtime, one of the things I ask you to do is think about the neighbors that we have in our community right now. It's gotten awfully cold out, and I know I'm sure I probably sound like I'm harping at this moment, but if you've got a few extra coats kicking around, you've got some extra boots, socks, anything like that, there's a few organizations in town that could use your help. Wisteria Community Association could take some of your stuff for helping people out, as well as Rise Bridge, as well as ICCS, as well as the Unitarian group here. There's a few places for shelters right now. If you can help out, it would be wonderful. Let's keep some of our people, our most vulnerable people, warm and during this time. Also, if you have just tuned in, you will have been hopefully watching our latest edition on Rogers. We're no longer Shaw, just to get that out there. It's now Rogers, so Act 3 on Rogers. We play 4 times a day all over Vancouver Island, and this episode is a really wonderful one to watch. So go to Rogers or Shaw, however you bring your television in, on Shaw Cable 4, and look for Act 3 and see our latest episode. And if you missed this episode and you just are driving along going, where can I hear more of this? That was only a 5-minute, just go on over to the YouTube station, to iHeartRadio, and to Spotify, where this recording will be available. In the meantime, thanks again for tuning in. We're super glad you're here. And back to the program with Gerry. Hey, Gerry, we're back.
Hi,
I
Kathy.
know. I am like, I love this so much. I love being able to talk to people and learn about what's going on in another part of the world. I know this is probably in an inappropriate, but I'm way to word it, but I call it my travel porn. Like I love to know about what's going on in other parts of the world. And specifically, when I think about, as we did a moment ago, just as I took station identification, is we're talking about the poverty that we're experiencing. And in Canada, I know that people are having a really hard time. We see so much of it. But in places that are third world countries like Guatemala, it's hard to like the difference in poverty is just so much more. It's got to be wonderful to go and be part of it without being voyeuristic. Do you follow where I'm going? Like
Absolutely.
it's like
There's,
it go,
yeah,
yeah, for sure.
there's a part of me every time when I'm down there thinking, you know, are you just doing this because you meet such nice people and the colors are so beautiful and the temperature is so wonderful and you know and sometimes I feel guilty for this because it I get so much back. I get so much
Yes.
back for that.
Yes.
And but the reality is we've set up like just Access to Education Collaborative. In the last 2 months, we've set up 6 schools with digital
Wow.
libraries. Yeah,
Wow. Wow.
we,
Wow.
we've sent 2 containers this year alone to Guatemala full of education equipment, like 1,500 computers we sent down.
That's incredible.
And plus hospital beds, all kinds of equipment. I partner with an organization called Health for Humanity, and we fill up a 40-foot container a couple of times a year with all kinds of medical equipment that normally would get, I don't know, tossed, but it's still good. Great beds, electric bed, like amazing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's it's out of lease terms or whatever it is. But we send this stuff down there, and we go directly from Vancouver with an organization called Rotary World Helps, and they arrange all the shipping. So it goes directly from Vancouver right to a hospital in Antigua, and they have a whole warehouse area where we can unpack all this, and then we can take from there. We take the computers and the monitors and all the other stuff that goes with that. And right now we've got a location in a town called Pastores, and the municipality has given us space. in their technical ability. So, and I've got these amazing people working with me. So I really understand the question, in that it's, you know, like, I'm getting so much out of it, but I'm also proud to say that I'm putting, and I know the results are making a difference. And the
Well,
great thing is, it's, you know, we're working with the Guatemalans themselves, not telling them what to do.
which I think is nothing about us without us, right? This is the philosophy, right, of making sure that people are able to help concrete make these decisions
Yeah.
that are affecting their lives. But I think the piece that really I'm admiring is we would normally have a lot of that stuff just go right to landfill, right? People are not, you know, I mean, where do first of all, where do these computers come from? I mean, that's
Great
a lot of
question.
computers, my friend. That's a lot of computers.
And
So
a lot of computers.
it's
It's
a
a
lot.
tremendous amount of computers. They come from mostly from universities, but we're trying to broaden our reach. So universities and big corporations and that generally lease computers for 3 years.
Mhm.
And at the end of 3 years, like the computer I'm working on right now is probably 8, if not 10 years old. It still works great. And so when they flip those computers, when they flip them through us, they're able to get a receipt. And so
It
I
works
get
perfectly. So they get attached.
1,500 free computers, only 3 years old. And
Yeah,
they're laptops and desktops and Chromebooks. The kids really like Chromebooks down there. So, and then we have them serviced, and we've set up a training place down in Guatemala, and we service them down there and make sure that everything's working. And yeah, so we're not just dumping eco trash down there. We're actually, you know, we have a whole refurbishing program that's going on down there, and that's going to be expanded hopefully this year. And in partnership with other organizations down there, we're training people how to repair computers. So,
So
yes,
this is a skill then that becomes, you know, something that in the long run does more than just, I mean, it's and this is, forgive me from sounding like a Bible thumper, but you're teaching people to fish, right?
yeah.
Right. Like it's more than just going down there and trying to fix an issue. You're giving people the tools that they need to be able to have better lives. And
Education is critical.
and you know, but I'm also glad that we're talking about this as not being, you know, the trash, right? Because we also know that there are some countries in the world that by the pound they take our trash. And really, I don't see how that is a benefit in the big picture of things. Of certainly not from our Earth as being as volatile as it is right now. We can't
Mhm.
be continuously destroying it. However, you know, when I think about that, I think about the 286s and the 386s, which are like, because I'm old, right? So I think, you know, here these
Sorry.
people, you know, so
I
to hear that
shouldn't
these are
laugh, but
like,
when you said 286, that's going back. That's
that's
going back.
going back.
Jackie, that's going back.
Right. And so I'm like, well, how are we actually giving people skills that are modern skills right now when we know that, you know, but a 3-year-old computer is still a pretty new computer in the big
Pretty
picture.
darn good computer. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would imagine that, I mean, I know, again, respectfully, it's not the same place. So, but I remember going into some very rural areas and traveling Mexico years ago, and I've been all over Mexico. And you know, at the end of the day, they're living in huts and, you know, dirt roads, and they are, you know, they've got a shared bathroom, shared kitchen, shared everything with their community members, and they've all got cell phones, which is just phenomenal to me, right? So I think that the good news is that this keeps people able to communicate with each other and
Yeah.
broaden our education as a tool for betterment in the big picture. But wow, like, yeah, I get a little surprised when I see that. Anyway,
Yeah, I totally understand. I found it was one of the things I found really, I don't want to say shocking, but it was just like seeing these indigenous women walking down the street with a pile of wood on their heads. Seriously, I've got photographs. I'm a photographer, so I've got all these amazing photographs. So pile of wood on their head.
Yeah.
Two indigenous women, fully dressed in their traditional clothes, and on their cell phones and chatting with each other.
It's like, I know, right? It's amazing.
It just cracks me up. But for them, the cell phone is a miracle
Well, of
because
course. Yeah.
because they can stay in touch with their families and all that. And the other thing is, it does give them. If you're going to live in this world, you have to have access. You have to have access to computers and internet and so on. Especially if you're hoping to get a decent job, you can't get a decent job. And with the schooling, like grade 5 for women is like top. That's as far as it goes in most cases. So what are they trained for at that point at grade 5? Not very much. Not very much. And by the way, I find that 90% of the time when I'm in Guatemala, I'm working with the women. The men have to work, they're out carrying stuff.
Yeah.
They don't have education as well. So
well, I was going to say, do men also have up to grade 5 or even less or slightly more?
In the outlying regions, grade 5 is kind of, if they're really poor, they take the kids out of school as early as possible so that they can have them doing handicrafts and stuff and helping them survive that way. The men, the men are, they're doing the hardest work I've ever seen. There was once years ago, all the cartoons and all that used to sort of make an idea that Central Americans, Mexicans, and all that didn't work hard. They always having siestas and stuff. And what I've seen down there is people working 14, 15 hours a day, working their tails off just to get by. And then at night they sit around the table and they make handicrafts to sell, at the market. There are markets, by the way, that do have fresh food, and that's where everybody goes once or twice a week to get food.
I love that the markets are there for the opportunity because, as I said, as we talked about earlier, if you're going into the grocery store and that there's nothing of that's nutritional basis behind it, it's hard to move forward. No matter who you are, people who are hungry and malnourished do not do well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've run into some amazing people down there that are trying to restart cultural food. I mean, it's not like the ancient Mayans were starving. They were eating great food, but so much of the past 200 years of history, well, 400 years really, of history has been taking the people off the land, putting them to work on farms and so on. So they've lost a lot of the indigenous knowledge in many areas. So it's really neat working with some young people that are trying to grow the sort of plants and that were natural for the area and that would feed their bodies so much better.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
there is an awakening, I would say, that's happening. Mm-hmm. But let me tell you, 30 years of war just tears the heart out of a community.
Absolutely. I mean, and not only that, the extreme weather patterns that they've experienced. They had 3 hurricanes, I think, over the course of a very short period of time, just over a few years. Yeah. Devastation for drought. Like it's certainly not been an easy time.
Yeah. No, it definitely.
You also said that you spent time in Honduras. And so tell us a little bit about is there a significant difference between Guatemala and Honduras, and what does that look like?
Okay, so in Guatemala, you'll see people in traditional clothes, even in the cities. They're looked down on, but traditional clothes are still pretty common there. And there's a very strong Mayan culture, especially out in like Solala and many of the places. It's really strong. In Honduras, that I didn't see that hardly at all. There are Mayans, there are people, but it's more what they call Ladinos or Mestizos, people who of mixed heritage. Yeah, if you go into the highlands, no, I didn't see anybody. I mean, like we were way the heck out into the mountains, and there was no traditional dress there at all. Interestingly enough, a lot of those mountain villages were not traditional mountain villages. These were places where people escaped to get away from the violence of the big cities in Honduras. So Honduras has a really sordid history of violence and narco problems and so on. I mean, the last two presidents of Honduras were, when the last president was arrested and his brother are both in American jails for gun running and being part of the cartels. So pretty scary situation.
No kidding.
Yeah, but once again, the people absolutely wonderful, amazing. But you do have to be more on your toes. I felt in Honduras like I was in a place called San Pedro Sula, which was the murder capital of the world for several years.
Wow.
Yeah, and I had some interesting experiences there, and I did not feel entirely safe in that town. No. I was so happy to find a hotel late at night. Bad Bunny was playing in San Pedro.
Oh my heavens!
There weren't any hotels or anything available anyway. And
oh my gosh!
We were charging around as it was getting dark, trying to find a place in San Pedro Sula. And we finally found what would definitely be considered a dump of a hotel here. But they had armed guards up front, and so right away I felt much better.
Much safer.
Much better about it. I ended up in an inside room with no windows.
Oh my gosh!
Absolutely perfect, and I felt very safe.
Wow!
I did not ever have that experience in Guatemala that I felt unsafe like that. But that night in San Pedro Sula was one of those where I think the fight or flight was definitely on the flight side.
I understand that. I understand that. I've had one experience in my life that I don't speak fluent Spanish anyway. I try, but I'm not I can understand more than I can speak. But when you get that little Jesus, like we just don't see it. We just don't see it in Canada. It's just a very different experience, right? And I was unable to speak Spanish for about 2 years because I was so like we had a big machine gun kind of placed, to our temples, and it was like, where are you going? Where are you going? Of course, they're saying this in Spanish very quickly, and I'm like, where are you going? Where are you going? Right? And all along, all of the other checkpoints have been just lovely, like no problem, right? Smooth sailing. These are very big guns, and it's very no me gusta.
No me gusta. Es verdad.
Es verdad, muy verdad. So, and so you're going now a couple of times a year, are you, or once a year?
Last year was only once, but I was there for 7 weeks, which was fantastic. Eileen came with me for a couple of weeks as well, and we actually did some touristing. Right.
Wow. And since you don't normally go down there to do touristing, that must have been quite wonderful.
Oh, it was really fun. We stayed in a really nice hotel in Antigua, built in 1926.
Gorgeous.
Absolutely gorgeous. Huge central atrium and, with a fountain in it. And the building was just wonderful. It was right downtown Antigua, 1 block from the Central Park. Well, if people want to travel to something really special, Antigua is that. It is. It's a gorgeous city, and then it's only about 2 hours from there to Lake Atlan. So there is so much to do down there. And the other thing is that the people don't realize. They think, oh my God, it's going to be hot. We're in the highlands, and the average temperature is 22 degrees year round.
Oh, so it's mild. It's not hot. It's not cold. It's just mild.
If there were a couple of days when it was like 26, 27 outside, but that was it. And at night,
Considering last summer, we were getting plus 32 and plus
they couldn't believe
33,
it.
like,
When I
yeah,
told them
like
that, they
very
couldn't believe it.
different.
And now they do get the rainy season, which can be pretty intense.
Yeah, lots of flooding.
Yeah, lots of flooding. Yeah, my project coordinator down there, Karina, sent me a photograph of a river running through her house as this year, a couple of times.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just great. Let's say a creek. Let's say a creek. But the houses up the hill from her got washed away. So yeah, it's such a different lifestyle. You were talking earlier about our our perspective on poverty.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, I mean, there are people here who are really struggling.
Absolutely.
I want to be one of the people standing.
It's a very different kind of poverty.
It is different.
Yeah.
It is different. And there are options here that you know, it may not be great, but there are some options here. Down there, you don't have that option.
No.
And if you're a woman in her 40s or 50s or 60s, and you're single, you, as Karina, who's 54, she's a grandmother. She said to me, she said, I'm of no value anymore in my community. She is now, because she is now my project coordinator, and she is the one that set up those 6 schools in the last 2 months.
Congratulations on 6 schools. Like, that to me is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
Pretty extraordinary. Yeah.
And we've got a bunch more. The second container not got lost, but ended up in China for a couple of weeks. So it finally ended up in Guatemala on January 1st. And it should be at the hospital. So we're going to start unpacking that one. We can do a bunch more stuff.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome. Well, congratulations. How can people help, Gerry? Like, how can people get involved, or, you know, what do you see as being something that we could do to help support you?
Well, I mean, of course, raising money is always a big part, but one of the things that people might be able to, like, you cover the whole Cowichan Valley, right?
I do, yeah. This show does right down to, I would say, it starts to get a little bit harder in Duncan, but it covers right through until pretty much as you're getting into the downtown core of Duncan, and then it goes all the way up towards Courtney, and then over to the Sunshine Coast. So we've got a fairly broad our listenership, as well, of course, the YouTube station and other things. You know, it's worldwide. We've got people watching from all over the place. Hopefully one day someone will be watching from Guatemala, or, you know, just saying.
That would be great. That would be great.
Wouldn't that be great?
Actually, once I get
that it will be happening.
I will be sending it to Guatemala.
Absolutely. Yes, you will. Yes, you will. There we go. We'll be playing there. You never know.
I think the easiest way to get a hold of me is if you search for Access to Education Collaborative .org. I don't think it's spelled exactly like that, but anyway, if you search on that, both in Facebook and for the website, so Access to Education Collaborative, then you can see what we're doing. You know what we could use? We could use more computers. We can always use more computers. So if people are, if your business is, you know, is retiring some computers, you know, they can't be too old, because we don't want to be sending trash down there.
No, exactly.
And they need to be functional. But if the local branch of VIU is thinking of retiring a bunch of computers, give me a call. We'll get them in a container and get them down there. We are going to be having a Hot Latin Nights party on April 6th.
Hot
Latin Nights, April 6th at the Nanaimo Yacht Club.
April 6th, Nanaimo Yacht Club, one of my favorite places.
Absolutely. And we're going to have dance instructors. So if you want to learn a little bit of bachata or salsa or whatever stuff,
just
that
fun to hang out.
This is going to be fun. This is going to be fun. And we also have we have art from Guatemala. We have photographs. We have all kinds of wonderful things. I've got to set up my little, what do you call it? My little store, my
Your
merch area.
merch, and that's on your Facebook page, is it as well?
It has been.
Oh, good. Listen, any way that there's a way that there's some stuff that can be shared with community,
Yeah,
we want
yeah,
to do that. So I will also put it, wherever I can on
yeah.
the,
You know, you can put my phone number on there if
Mhm.
need be, and my email address. Um, yeah, this is one of the most worthwhile things I've done in my life. And
Well,
the fact that it feeds me so much happiness.
yes. Yeah, I can see, I've known you for a few years now, and I just love the glow of joy that's coming, is radiating across our Zoom screen right now. I know our radio listeners can't see it, but I know our YouTube viewers will be able to watch that happening right before us. Like I love to see that that you're doing this work still, and have created another access point for people to be educated is brilliant. So I'm just super glad that you're doing this, Gerry. That's just fabulous. As we
Yeah.
close off, though, like we've got a couple of minutes left of the program, not too many. But I always sort of like to think about the life lesson or the wisdom piece that kind of comes from this. And I would imagine you probably have a few, just in the fact that you've been doing this for the last however many years going down there. There is one question I did want to ask you,
Mhm.
because I didn't see you over COVID. And I'm wondering, how was Guatemala, and has Guatemala bounced back from COVID?
Well, Guatemalans are nothing if not resilient. They
So
are
true.
amazing people, and so
Yeah.
you can't keep them down.
Yeah.
they're back to their weaving. They're back to their families. It was really, really hard for them. Schools closed for 3 years. So
Wow.
this is
3 years.
yeah, 3 years.
Holy
So this is
mackerel. Can't even imagine
another
a school
reason.
closing for 3 years.
So kids have
Yeah.
lost their entire education in some cases. But I think that the thing that, like, what is my little bit of wisdom out of this? The thing for me is I've come to realize I don't do charity.
Mhm.
Okay? I see charity as something where somebody is handing something down to somebody.
Mhm.
What I'm doing is I was born lucky. I really was literally born lucky. And I'm just sharing with my family.
Yeah.
And that's how I see these people like Corina and their kids. I mean, it's almost like I'm their grandfather. It's really neat. And so for me, this is not about charity. This is about sharing our wealth with them and giving them an opportunity to have a better life.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're all family,
Right?
right? We're all family. We're all connected in this, beast of an earth, right? And, being able to be there to support people. I love the idea of schools opening, to be honest with you. 6 schools to me is like, my tambourine is going just for that piece
So
of
is
it
mine.
alone. Like that, because that's huge, right? When people have an opportunity to be connected, the world is not a very big place when we're connected,
They're
right?
connected.
So this is a big opportunity. Do you think that that Guatemala has changed in the last few years since these schools have opened? Do you think that there's been,
Mhm.
yeah,
So that's again another really good question. This project that I'm working with, so I'm working with a Guatemalan organization on this. It's called Mundo Posible, or Possible World, and they're a nonprofit charity. Well, it's not called a charity, but they have been committed to doing this for years now, since 2014. That's a while. And they've translated all of this stuff into English. They were doing really good. They had about 400 schools that they had supported, and then COVID hit, and all those schools got closed. In a lot of cases, the teachers who were teaching the programs left. Kids grew too old, and in a lot of cases, the hardware became out of date during that time. It wasn't serviced or whatever. So we've been reopening a lot of those schools, and finding those schools, and working with Mundo Posible and a bunch of Rotary Clubs here on the island. The help I get from Rotary Clubs is.
I love Rotary. I love
It's
Rotary. I'm not a Rotarian. I'm a friend of Rotary. If you
Yeah,
need
you
me
are.
there, but I'm a friend of Rotary.
Well, yeah, I couldn't do this without Rotary. I'll tell you that.
Amazing
The
people.
connections are amazing. And Duncan clubs have helped us. Nanaimo clubs have helped us. The Ladysmith Club, of course, has helped us. Parksville, Comox, and I'm doing work with all of them. Victoria, in the United States, anywhere where there's a Rotary Club, they see this. It's fantastic. So the question though was, have we seen change? We have seen changes almost overnight. Well, within the first year when the kids get these things, and the difference for the kids is that the teachers are excited.
Yes.
Because these teachers, in a lot of cases, they're lucky if they've got a whiteboard. They don't have libraries in a lot of cases. And for them to have access to, so we also do training, and we do technical support, and we replace computers if they break down. So that's all in place. And we have a big training program for the teachers that teaches them not just about how to use the hardware, but the concept of project-based learning, inquiry-based learning. And the kids love this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta tell you, it makes me happy. I'm a teacher at heart and always have been, and will always want to teach people how to be good to each other a little bit more. And this is a phenomenal way for that to happen. It has been a pleasure to have you as my guest today, Gerry. Thanks for being here. I will make sure that everything is in the chat box for people to be able to connect with you. But do you have do you have an email address or something you can shout out right at the moment, or?
Let's use my own, gbeltgens@gmail.com. I've also got admin but never mind that one. gbeltgens@gmail.com. So GBELTGENS@gmail.com.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. That does it for this episode of Act 3. So my hope for you today is that you have a most wonderful day, and that you tune in next time on Act 3. And don't forget to watch us on Rogers. Have yourself a wonderful day, everybody. Bye for now.
Thanks, Kathy.
Pleasure.